grew older, I realized that there was a certain appeal to writing about the dark side of human nature. And so, I decided to write a novel that would explore the darkest depths of the human psyche. Psychological horror is a genre that often gets overlooked. It's seen as too dark, too graphic, too disturbing for some readers. But for those of us who love a good scare, there's nothing better than a well-done psychological horror novel. The Unthinkable is my first foray into the genre, and I'm excited to share it with readers. This novel is a story of love and loss, of family and friends, of what happens when the unthinkable becomes reality. I hope you enjoy reading The Unthinkable as much as I enjoyed writing it. The Unthinkable is a story about a young woman who is slowly driven insane by her own mind. The novel explores the themes of mental illness and paranoia, and how they can consume a person's life. It is a frightening and suspenseful story that will leave you questioning your own sanity. Psychological horror is a genre that explores our deepest, darkest fears. It preys on our insecurities and our deepest desires, manipulating them into a form that is both terrifying and alluring. And while it may seem like a recent phenomenon, psychological horror has been around for centuries. The Unthinkable is a psychological horror thriller that will keep you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. It follows the story of Dr. Emma Rhodes, a psychiatric doctor who specializes in treating patients with severe mental disorders. When a new patient, Alice, comes to her with a strange and disturbing story, Emma finds herself drawn into a world of dark secrets and chilling possibilities. As Emma gets closer to the truth, she realizes that Alice is not the only one with a secret. And as the body count starts to rise, she realizes that she may be the next victim. The Unthinkable is a fast-paced, edge-of-your-seat thriller that will leave you gasping for breath. If you're looking for a book that will keep you up at night, this is it. It was a dark and stormy night. Philip had been driving home from work, and was now about an hour away from his house. He had made it the last few miles, but was now in the throes of a full-blown panic attack. His breaths came in short gasps and his heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was trying to escape his chest. He pulled to the side of the road, scattering gravel with his hands, and tried to calm himself. He closed his eyes and took several deep breaths before starting the car. He crept along the road, his car the only light in a wide and dark world. The rain continued to beat against the windshield like the footsteps of some unseen thing. Slowly, carefully, so as not to make a sound, I edged my way across the cold concrete floor, wincing as bits of grit and gravel bite into the soft pads of my feet. I know I must be close now. I can feel it in the way the air seems to thicken and press in on me from all sides. There's a smell too, a sharp, acrid tang that makes my nostrils burn. And then there's the sound, a low, keening wail that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, a sound that drills into my brain and sets my teeth on edge. I'm getting close. I can feel it. Whatever is making that sound, I know I have to find it. I have to see it. I have to know what it is. I edge around the corner, heart pounding in my chest, and there it is. It's hard to describe, because it doesn't really look like anything I've ever seen before. It's like a mass of writhing, pulsing flesh, all tangled up with itself. And it's huge. So huge that it fills the entire room, from floor to ceiling. I stare at it, transfixed, as it continues to wail and moan, and I know that I've found something truly horrifying. Something that I was never meant to see. But I can't look away. I can't tear my eyes from the grotesque sight in front of me. And then, slowly, it turns to look at me, and I know that it knows I'm here. And it knows what I'm thinking. It knows that I'm going to write a psychological horror thriller about it. CH.1. The first time it happened, I didn't know what to think. I was in my room, sitting at my desk, when I heard the voices. They were soft at first, whispers in the back of my mind. I tried to ignore them, but they kept getting louder and more insistent. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could feel the fear and the panic in their words. It was like they were trying to warn me of something. I tried to shake it off, but the more I tried, the more the voices grew until they were screaming in my head. I put my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. Then, suddenly, they stopped. I sat in silence for a moment, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Had I really just heard voices in my head? I tried to rationalize it, tell myself that it was just my imagination, but I knew that wasn't true. Something was happening to me, something I couldn't explain, and I was scared. Dr. Emma Rhodes slammed her car door shut, glad to be out of the cold. She strode quickly towards the entrance of the mental hospital, her heels sinking into the freshly fallen snow. As she approached, the imposing building loomed over her, its windows reflecting the light of the full moon. She couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding as she entered, the door swinging shut behind her with a loud bang. She made her way down the long, dimly lit hallway, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She could hear the sound of screams coming from one of the rooms, and she quickened her pace, not wanting to be anywhere near that particular patient. She arrived at her office and went inside, licking on the light. She hung up her coat and sat down at her desk, her mind already racing with the day's work. She had a full caseload of patients to see, and she knew that each one would be a challenge. But the one she was most dreading was her last appointment of the day. She knew that he was dangerous. She could see it in his eyes. And she knew that he was going to do something unthinkable. The first time it happened, Dr. Emma Rhodes didn't know what to think. She was treating a patient with severe schizophrenia, and he had been having a particularly bad day. He was ranting and raving, and she was having a hard time getting through to him. Suddenly, in the middle of his tirade, he stopped. He looked at her with a look of pure terror in his eyes, and said, "They're coming for me." "Who's coming for you?" Emma asked, but he didn't answer. He just stared at her, his eyes wide with fear. Then, without warning, he leaped up from his chair and ran for the door. Emma tried to stop him, but he was too strong. He fled the office, and she didn't see him again for weeks. When he finally returned, he was a different person. He was calm, and he told her what had happened. "They came for me, just like I knew they would. They were these things, these creatures. I don't know what they were, but they were after me. I ran, but I couldn't get away. They were everywhere, chasing me. I thought I was going to die. But then I saw you. You were like a beacon of light in the darkness. I ran to you, and you saved me. You drove them away." Emma wasn't sure what to believe. Was he delusional, or had he really seen something? She didn't know, but she was starting to get a feeling that something was very wrong. Dr. Emma Rhodes was in her office at the mental hospital, going over her notes from her last session with her patient, when she heard a knock at the door. She got up to answer it, and found a young woman standing there, who introduced herself as Karen. Karen said she was a friend of Emma's patient, and that she was very worried about him. She said he had been talking about suicide a lot lately, and she was afraid he was going to do something drastic. Emma told Karen she would talk to her patient and see what she could do. Karen thanked her and left. Emma went back to her patient's file and started to read through it. She was shocked at what she saw. He had a history of violence and mental instability. It was clear that he was a danger to himself and to others. Emma decided she needed to talk to him again, and soon. She had to find out what was going on in his head, and why he was considering suicide. She left her office and went to his room. When she walked in, he was sitting on the edge of his bed, with a rope in his hand. Emma could see the fear in his eyes. He was scared, and he didn't want to die. But he was also tired of living. Tired of the voices in his head, tired of the pain. He wanted it all to end. Emma sat down next to him and asked him to talk to her. She promised she would listen, and that she would try to help him. He didn't say anything at first, but then he started to talk. He told her about the voices he heard, and the things they made him do. He told her about the times he had hurt people, and how much it scared him. He told her about how he just wanted it all to stop. Emma listened, and she sympathized. She knew how he felt, because she had been there herself. She told him she understood, and she promised to help him. But first, she needed to know one thing. Why? She asked him. Why do you want to die? He looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was unbearable. I just can't do this anymore, he said. I can't keep living like this. It's too hard. Emma nodded. She knew how he felt. She had been there herself. She told him she would help him, but first he had to promise her something. You have to promise me that you won't do anything until we figure this out, she said. Promise me you'll give me a chance to help you. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he nodded. I promise, he said. Emma breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you, she said. Then she got to work. Dr. Emma Rhodes is in her office at the mental hospital, going over her notes from her latest session with her patient, when she hears a knock at the door. She gets up to answer it, and finds a young woman standing there, who introduces herself as Sarah. Sarah tells Emma that she is there to kill her. Emma tries to reason with Sarah, but it quickly becomes clear that Sarah is not in her right mind. She attacks Emma, and Emma is forced to fight back, eventually killing Sarah in self-defense. As she looks down at Sarah's body, Emma is horrified to realize that she may have just made a huge mistake. Sarah was not the only one who was after her. There are more people out there, people who believe that Emma is responsible for the deaths of their loved ones, and they will stop at nothing to make her pay. Emma is now in a race against time to try to find out who is behind all of this and why they think she is responsible. But as she gets closer to the truth, she realizes that she may not be able to handle what she finds. The darkness engulfs me like an old friend. I am safe here, protected from the bright, cruel world. I curl up in a ball, hugging my knees to my chest and rock back and forth. I rock until I am lost in the rhythm and the world disappears. Suddenly, I am jolted awake by a sharp pain in my head. I cry out and clutch at my hair. There is something wrong. Something terribly wrong. I try to get up, but my legs are weak and trembling. I crawl towards the door, clutching at the walls for support. My head is pounding and my vision is blurred. I reach for the doorknob, but my hand slips and I fall to the ground. I lay there, gasping for breath, as the darkness closes in around me. Dr. Emma Rhodes sat in her office, staring at the empty chair across from her. She had seen a lot of patients in her career, but none had ever affected her quite like this one. She had been treating him for months, and he had made progress, but today he seemed different. He was more agitated, more paranoid. She could see the fear in his eyes. And then he started to talk about the voices he was hearing. At first, she tried to dismiss it as a symptom of his illness, but the more he talked, the more she realized that something was truly wrong. He was talking about things that couldn't be real, things that couldn't possibly be happening. But the more he talked, the more she realized that he believed wholeheartedly in what he was saying, and that scared her more than anything. She didn't know what to do, so she did the only thing she could think of. She called for help. After a few minutes, Dr. Emma Rhodes began to feel lightheaded. She had forgotten to eat breakfast that morning and her blood sugar was crashing. She sat down at her desk and took a few deep breaths, trying to calm herself. Suddenly, her patient, Lily, burst into the office. Dr. Rhodes, I need to talk to you, she exclaimed. Lily, what's wrong? Emma asked, rising to her feet. It's my daughter, Emily, Lily said, her voice shaking. She's missing. Missing? Emma repeated, her heart sinking. I think she's been kidnapped, Lily continued. I found this note on her bed. She handed Emma a piece of paper. Emma's hands began to shake as she read the note. "Lily, I'm so sorry," she said, "but I promise you, we will find her. I'll do everything I can to help you." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know you will, Dr. Rhodes," she said. "I know you'll find her." What did the note on her bed say? "We have your daughter. If you want to see her again, meet us at the old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town tonight at midnight. Come alone. Dr. Rhodes, we've been expecting you." The voice is cold, impersonal. It seems to echo in the small, sterile room. Dr. Emma Rhodes freezes in the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. She knows she shouldn't be here. She knows this is a mistake. But it's too late to turn back now. Dr. Rhodes takes a deep breath and forces herself to step into the room. The door slams shut behind her. Dr. Rhodes whirls around, her heart racing. She's trapped. There's no way out. She's going to die here. Dr. Rhodes feels a cold sweat break out on her forehead. She's going to die here, in this horrible place. And she knows why. She knows what's coming for her. The thing in the shadows. The thing that's been stalking her for weeks. The thing that's been watching her every move. Waiting for the moment to strike. Dr. Rhodes is going to die here. And there's nothing she can do to stop it. "Please, I can't take it anymore." The voices, they won't stop. Dr. Emma Rhodes could see the terror in the patient's eyes. She knew all too well the horrors that could await someone who was lost in their own mind. "Can you help her?" The thug standing in the corner of the room blurted out. "I promise, we'll get you help. I won't let anything happen to you." Emma did her best to reassure her patient, but she knew the truth. There was only so much she could do. The patient was soon transferred to a higher security ward, but Emma's mind was racing. She had seen patients like this before, and she knew that this was only the beginning. The next few days were a blur as Emma tried to keep up with her workload. She was seeing more and more patients who were reporting similar symptoms. Something was definitely wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Then, one night, she received a call from the hospital. One of her patients had been found dead in her cell. The autopsy revealed that the cause of death was strangulation. Emma's mind was racing. The next few weeks were a nightmare as the body count continued to rise. Emma was determined to find out what was causing this carnage of her patients, but she was running out of time. Dr. Emma Rhodes was in her office at the mental hospital, writing in her patient's file. She had been treating her for years, and she knew that her disorder was getting worse. She was starting to see things that weren't there, and she was having trouble sleeping. Emma was about to close the file when the patient suddenly spoke. "I know what you're thinking," she said. Emma turned to look at her. "What am I thinking?" "You're thinking that I'm crazy," the patient said. "You think I'm delusional." Emma shook her head. "I don't think you're crazy. I think you're ill." The patient laughed. "You're right, I am ill. But not in the way you think." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" "I'm not crazy," the patient said. "I'm possessed." Emma took a step back. "Possessed?" The patient nodded. "Yes. There's something inside of me, something that's not human." Emma's heart was racing. She didn't know what to say. The patient stood up and walked towards her. "It's coming for you, Emma. It's coming for all of us." Emma took another step back, her heart pounding in her chest. She was starting to believe that her patient was possessed. And she was starting to believe that she was next. CH.3 The group of people slowly backs away from me as I keep the knife raised in my hand. I don't know what came over me. I just felt this overwhelming urge to hurt somebody. Anybody. It doesn't make any sense. I'm a psychiatric doctor. I help people. I don't hurt them. But the blood on the knife feels good. It's like a release. I can feel the tension draining out of my body with every drop. I start to giggle. It's a high-pitched, hysterical sound that doesn't sound like me at all. Somebody call the police. Somebody shouts. I back away from the group, still giggling. I know I should be scared. I know I should be feeling something other than this strange sense of calm. But I can't. I feel like I'm watching myself from outside my body. Like this is all happening to someone else. Someone bumps into me from behind and I stumble. The knife falls from my hand and clatters to the ground. That's when the screaming starts. The darkness engulfs her like an old friend. She is safe here, protected from the outside world. But even in the safety of the darkness, she can still hear the screams. The screams of the patients. The screams of the doctors. The screams of the nurses. The screams of the damned. Dr. Emma Rhodes stands in the center of the room, her white coat stained with blood. Her blue eyes are cold, her face is expressionless. She is a clinical psychopath. A killer. And she is not done yet. There are still patients to be killed. Doctors to be tortured. Nurses to be mutilated. Emma's phone vibrated for what felt like the millionth time that day. She sighed and checked the screen, half expecting to see another missed call from her mother. Instead, there was a new voicemail from an unknown number. She played it, and a chill ran down her spine when she heard the voice on the other end. Dr. Rhodes, I need your help. I can't stop thinking about the things I've done. The things I'm going to do. Please, you have to help me before it's too late. The voice sounded young, male, and scared. Emma didn't know who it was, but she knew she had to help him. She quickly typed out a response and hit send, then grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. She had a feeling this was going to be a long night. He's killing through her by exploiting her empathy as a means of hypnosis. Dr. Rhodes was called into a meeting with the hospital director. He told her that the board had made the decision. She was to be immediately fired, effective immediately. The reason given was that she had been negligent in her duties and had failed to provide adequate care to her patients. Dr. Rhodes was shocked and devastated. She had worked so hard to help her patients and save their lives. Now she was being accused of doing the opposite. The director told her that she could appeal the decision, but she would need to leave the hospital immediately. Dr. Rhodes packed up her things and left the hospital, her head spinning. She had no idea what she was going to do now. She went home and tried to process what had happened. It didn't make any sense. She had done nothing wrong. Suddenly, she realized that she was being followed. She turned around and saw a man in a dark hoodie watching her from across the street. She started to walk away quickly, but the man began to follow her. She started to run, but he ran after her. She was about to scream for help when she felt a sharp pain in her back. She fell to the ground, unconscious. Dr. Emma Rhodes was in her office at the state hospital for the criminally insane, going over her notes from her latest session with her patient, when she heard a soft knock at her door. She got up to answer it, and found herself face to face with a young woman who looked to be in her early 20s. The woman was pale and thin, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She was clutching a tattered notebook to her chest. "Can I help you?" Emma asked. "I need to talk to you," the woman said. "It's about my brother." "All right," Emma said. "Come in and have a seat." The woman sat down in the chair across from Emma's desk and stared at her for a moment. Then she took a deep breath and began to speak. "My brother is in here," she said. "He's been in here for years. I don't think he's ever going to get better." "What's your brother's name?" Emma asked. "Andrew," the woman said. "He's been diagnosed with schizophrenia." "I'm sorry to hear that," Emma said. "What can I do for you?" "I need you to help me get him out of here," the woman said. "I can't stand to see him in this place anymore." "I understand how you feel," Emma said, "but your brother is very sick. He needs to be in a place where he can get the help he needs. You don't understand. the woman said, her voice rising. He's never going to get better in here. They're just going to keep drugging him up and leaving him in his cell. I can't let that happen. I need to get him out of here. I'm sorry, Emma said, but I can't just release your brother into your care. It's not that simple. You have to help me, the woman said, her voice bleeding. Please, just tell me what I need to do. I'm sorry, Emma said again. But I can't help you. The woman got up from her chair and stared at Emma for a moment. Then she turned and walked out of the office, her shoulders shaking. Emma sat at her desk for a moment, wondering if she had made the right decision. Then she sighed and went back to work. It was already pitch black outside by the time Emma left the hospital. She had stayed late to finish up some paperwork and now she was feeling the effects of a long day. Her head was pounding and all she wanted to do was go home, take a hot bath, and forget about everything. She was walking to her car when she heard a noise coming from the bushes. It sounded like someone was crying. Emma hesitated for a moment, but then she decided to investigate. She walked over to the bushes and peered inside. There was a woman huddled in the fetal position, sobbing uncontrollably. Emma recognized her as one of her patients, a woman who had been diagnosed with severe depression. It's okay, Emma said softly as she knelt down next to the woman. I'm here, I'm not going to hurt you. The woman slowly looked up at Emma with eyes that were filled with terror. He's coming for me, she whimpered. He's going to kill me. Who's coming for you? Emma asked, but the woman was too distraught to answer. It's okay, I'm here now. I won't let anything happen to you. Emma stood up and reached for the woman's hand, but she flinched away from her touch. I'm sorry, the woman said, I can't. And then she ran. Emma watched her go, not knowing what to do. She was about to go after her when she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw a man walking towards her with a menacing look on his face. Instinctively, Emma knew that this was the man the woman had been talking about, and she knew that he was coming for her. I'm sorry, Dr. Rhodes, but we're going to have to ask you to leave. Dr. Rhodes was shocked. She had been working at the mental hospital for years and had never been asked to leave. What? Why? She asked. We've been getting complaints from the patients, the administrator said. They say you're too forceful with your treatments. They say you're making them feel worse. But I'm just trying to help them. Dr. Rhodes protested. I'm sorry, but we can't have our patients feeling like they're being tortured. You'll have to go. Dr. Rhodes packed up her things and left the hospital. She was devastated. She had dedicated her life to helping people with mental disorders, and now she was being kicked out. She didn't know what she was going to do now. Dr. Rhodes was driving home from the hospital when she got a call from her husband. Emma, you need to come home. Something's wrong with Abby. Dr. Rhodes's heart sank. Her daughter Abby was the one person she couldn't help. Abby had been diagnosed with schizophrenia when she was a teenager, and ever since then, she had been in and out of mental hospitals. Dr. Rhodes rushed home to find her husband, Mark, pacing in the living room. What's wrong? She asked. It's Abby, Mark said. She's in the backyard, and she's dug a hole in the ground. What do you mean? Dr. Rhodes asked, but she already knew. She hurried out to the backyard, where Abby was indeed standing in a hole that she had dug. She was muttering to herself and rocking back and forth. Oh, Abby, Dr. Rhodes said, her heart breaking. She tried to get her daughter to come out of the hole, but Abby was too far gone. She was lost in her own world, and there was nothing Dr. Rhodes could do to help her. Emma was in her office, writing up a report on one of her patients, when she heard a commotion in the waiting room. She got up to see what was going on and saw that one of her patients, a young woman named Sarah, was having a panic attack. Emma helped Sarah calm down and then asked her what was wrong. Sarah told Emma that she had been having nightmares about a monster that was coming to kill her. Emma asked Sarah to describe the monster, and Sarah said that it was a huge, misshapen creature with multiple eyes and mouths. Emma tried to reassure Sarah that the monster was not real, but Sarah was not convinced. Emma decided to have Sarah commitment for a 72-hour psychiatric evaluation. She called Sarah's parents to let them know what was happening and then took Sarah to the hospital herself. Once there, Emma helped Sarah check in and then said goodbye. Sarah's parents thanked Emma for her help and then they left. Emma went back to her office, where she tried to forget about the strange case of Sarah and the monster in her nightmares. She was about to take a break when she got a call from a patient who was in a panic. The patient, a young woman named Sarah, was hysterical and told Emma that she was being followed by a man who was trying to kill her. Emma tried to calm Sarah down and asked her to describe the man. Sarah said that he was tall, thin, and had a pale face. She said that he was wearing a black trench coat and a fedora, and that his eyes were black and soulless. Emma convinced Sarah to come to the office so she could help her. When Sarah arrived, Emma put her in a room by herself to calm down. Emma then called the police and told them what was going on. While Emma was on the phone with the police, Sarah started to scream. Emma ran into the room to find Sarah being strangled by the man she had described. The man then looked at Emma and smiled before disappearing. The police arrived and found Sarah dead. They questioned Emma, but she had no idea who the man was or why he had killed Sarah. This was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, more patients started to come to Emma with similar stories. They all said that they were being followed by the same man, and that he was trying to kill them. Emma was starting to lose her mind. She was being haunted by the man in the black trench coat, and she had no idea how to stop him. I pull back the curtain and see the body. There is no blood, no gore. But the eyes are wide open and staring, the mouth open in a silent scream. I scream too as I stumble backwards, tripping over the chair and landing hard on the floor. I scramble to my feet and run for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know what to do. I can't go to the police, they'll never believe me. I need to find someone who will believe me, who will help me. But who? I think of Dr. Rhodes. She helped me before, when I was having problems with my medication. She's a psychiatric doctor, she'll know what to do. I call her from my car and she agrees to meet me at her office. I'm relieved and scared all at the same time. I'm not sure what I'm going to find when I tell her what happened, but I know I need to tell someone. I'm shaking when I walk into her office. She leads me to a chair and I sit down, burying my face in my hands. I can't look at her, I can't say the words. But she's patient. She waits until I'm ready, and then I tell her everything. About the body, the eyes, the mouth. She listens without interruption, and when I'm finished, she asks me a few questions. Then she's quiet for a long time. I'm starting to get scared again, thinking she doesn't believe me. But then she finally speaks. Emma, I believe you, she says. What you're describing sounds like a phenomenon called corpse decomposition vision. I stare at her, not sure if I've heard her correctly. What is that? It's a side effect of certain mental disorders, she explains. People with schizophrenia or severe PTSD can sometimes see visions of corpses, even when there isn't one present. I digest her words, trying to make sense of them. So you're saying I'm not crazy? No, you're not crazy, she says, but you are suffering from a mental disorder. I'm going to refer you to a colleague of mine, he's a specialist in this area. I think you need help, Emma. I nod, feeling relieved and scared all at the same time. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know I need to face it. With Dr. Rhodes' help, I'll get through this. Dr. Rhodes, a voice said from behind her. Emma turned around to see a police officer standing there, looking serious. We need to talk. The officer led her into a small room and closed the door. Emma sat down, feeling a sinking feeling in her stomach. "What's this about?" she asked. "I'm afraid I have some bad news," the officer said. "One of your patients, Sarah Chambers, has been found dead." Emma's heart sank. Sarah was one of her most difficult cases, but she had been making progress. "How did she die?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "It appears she committed suicide," the officer said. "We found a note." The officer handed Emma a piece of paper. Emma's hands shook as she read the note. "I'm sorry," the officer said. "I know this must be difficult for you." Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She was in shock, her mind racing. Sarah had been getting better, she was sure of it. How could she have killed herself? "We'll need you to come down to the station and answer some questions," the officer said. Emma nodded again and stood up. She followed the officer out of the room, her mind still spinning. Sarah was dead, and she had no idea why. Ch.4 Dr. Emma Rhodes, a psychiatric doctor who specializes in treating patients with severe mental disorders. Dr. Emma Rhodes was in her office at the mental hospital, going over her notes from her last session with Mr. Jones. She was deep in thought, trying to figure out what could be causing his delusions, when she heard a knock at her door. She got up to answer it, and found one of the orderlies standing there. "Dr. Rhodes, there's a phone call for you. It's your husband." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from her husband in weeks. She hurried to the phone and picked it up. "David, is that you?" "Yes, it's me," he replied. His voice sounded strange, almost robotic. "What's wrong? Why haven't you called?" she asked. "I don't know. I can't remember." "Can't remember what?" "Anything. I can't remember anything." Emma's heart sank. This was not the husband she knew. Something was very wrong. "David, where are you?" she asked. "I don't know. I'm in the hospital, I think." "Which hospital?" "I don't know." Emma's mind was racing. What could she do? "David, I'm coming to get you. I'll find you, I promise." She hung up the phone and rushed out of her office. She had to find her husband before it was too late. Emma was in the middle of her morning rounds when she got the call. It was her boss, Dr. Williams. "Emma, I need you to come to my office right away." "Is something wrong?" "Just come to my office." Emma hung up the phone and finished her rounds. She could tell something was wrong, but she didn't want to jump to conclusions. When she got to Dr. Williams' office, he was pacing back and forth. "What's going on?" Emma asked. "I've just received some concerning news," Dr. Williams said. "One of our patients, a young woman named Sarah, has gone missing." "Missing? What do you mean missing?" "She was discharged from the hospital yesterday and her parents came to pick her up. They said she was going to stay with them for a while. But this morning, they called and said she never made it home. They've filed a missing persons report." "Do you think she could have run away?" Emma asked. "It's possible, but I'm not sure. Her parents said she was really scared and didn't want to leave the hospital. I'm worried something might have happened to her. Do you have any idea where she might have gone?" "No, but I was hoping you could talk to her parents and see if they have any idea. They're pretty shaken up. I don't think they're going to be much help." "I'll see what I can do," Emma said. She went to Sarah's parents' house and talked to them. They were clearly distraught and didn't know what to do. "We just don't understand where she could have gone," her mother said. "She was so scared yesterday. I just can't believe she would have run away." "Did she say anything to you before she left?" Emma asked. "No, she was very quiet. She didn't want to talk about what happened." "Do you have any idea where she might have gone?" "No, we've called all of her friends, but no one has seen her. We've looked everywhere." Emma tried to comfort them. but she was worried. Sarah was a vulnerable young woman, and she didn't know if she could handle being out on her own. She started making some calls and checking into some of Sarah's friends, but no one had seen her. Emma was starting to get really worried. She was about to make another call when she got a call from the police. "We've found her," the officer said. "She's dead." The walls were caving in. The voices were too loud. Too many. She couldn't think. Couldn't breathe. She was going to die here. She was sure of it. Dr. Emma Rhodes was having a panic attack. She had never been one for panic attacks, but ever since she started working at the mental hospital, they had become a regular occurrence. It was like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. She tried to take a deep breath and calm down, but it was impossible. She felt like she was suffocating. The door to her office burst open, and one of her patients, a young woman named Sarah, came running in. "Help me!" she screamed. "They're coming after me." Sarah was delusional and paranoid, and Emma knew that she wasn't really in any danger. But she also knew that Sarah believed that she was, and that was what mattered. Emma stood up and put her arms around Sarah, trying to calm her down. "It's okay," she said. "I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you." Sarah clung to her, shaking and sobbing. Emma did her best to comfort her, but she couldn't help but feel like she was failing. There was too much pain in this place. Too much darkness. She didn't know how much longer she could take it. Dr. Emma Rhodes was having a tough day. She had just treated a patient with a severe mental disorder and was feeling drained. As she was walking to her car, she heard a voice call out to her. "Dr. Rhodes." She turned to see a man walking towards her. He looked disheveled and paranoid. "Yes," she said, cautiously. "I need your help," the man said, pleadingly. "My mind is going crazy. I'm seeing things that aren't there. I'm hearing voices." Dr. Rhodes knew that this man was in need of urgent help. She agreed to see him at her office as soon as possible. As she was driving to her office, she received a call from the police. They had found the body of a woman who had been brutally murdered. The woman was one of Dr. Rhodes' patients. When she arrived at her office, the man was waiting for her. He looked even more agitated than before. Dr. Rhodes sat down with the man and began to talk to him. She quickly realized that he was suffering from a severe case of schizophrenia. She prescribed him medication and made an appointment for him to come back in a week. As the man was leaving, he turned to Dr. Rhodes and said, "Thank you. I don't know what I would do without you." Dr. Rhodes was shaken by the man's words. She had a feeling that she would be seeing him again sooner than she thought. "I'm sorry, Dr. Rhodes, but we're going to have to ask you to leave," the head nurse says, her voice cold and emotionless. "What? Why?" Emma asks, her heart racing. "We can't have you here anymore. You're a liability." "I don't understand. I've done nothing wrong." "It doesn't matter. You're not welcome here anymore." Emma is stunned. She's been working at the hospital for years and has never been accused of anything. She's dedicated her life to helping her patients. "Please, let me speak to Dr. Summers," she pleads. "Dr. Summers is no longer with us. He's been fired." "Fired? Why?" "I'm sorry, Dr. Rhodes, but you'll have to leave." The nurse hands her a box of her belongings and escorts her to the door. Emma is in shock as she walks out of the hospital. She can't believe this is happening. She gets in her car and drives away, her mind racing. What could she have done to deserve this? She's never harmed a patient. She's always tried to help them. Suddenly, she remembers the patient she treated yesterday, the one who was ranting and raving about the voices in his head. Could he have been right? Could there really be something inside her mind, trying to take over? She shakes her head, trying to clear her thoughts. It's impossible. There's no such thing as mind control. But what if there is? Emma realizes she's not going insane. She's being targeted, and she has to find out who is behind it before it's too late. The next day, Dr. Rhodes was back at the hospital, trying to put the pieces together from the previous night. She was still shaken up, but she had to focus on her work. She was seeing patients all day, and it wasn't until her last one that she had a chance to think about what had happened. That patient was a young woman named Sarah, who was suffering from severe anxiety and depression. She had been to see Dr. Rhodes several times before, and she was making progress, but she was still very fragile. Dr. Rhodes was just finishing up with Sarah when she got a call from the police. They were at the hospital, and they needed to speak with her. Dr. Rhodes went to the lobby, where 2 police officers were waiting for her. They told her that they had found a body in the woods near her house. The body was badly decomposed, but they were able to identify it as the missing women from the support group. Dr. Rhodes was devastated. She couldn't believe that one of her patients had killed herself. She had been so close to helping her. The police asked Dr. Rhodes if she knew of any reason why the woman would have taken her own life. Dr. Rhodes told them about the woman's history of abuse and how she had been struggling lately. The police thanked Dr. Rhodes for her help and told her they would be in touch if they had any more questions. Dr. Rhodes went back to her office, where she sat down and cried. She had failed her patient. She should have been able to help her. And now she was dead. The first thing that Dr. Emma Rhodes saw when she entered the room was the body of her patient, lying in a pool of blood. She didn't need to look any further to know that he had been brutally murdered. The second thing she saw was the killer, standing in the corner of the room, covered in blood. He was holding a knife in one hand and a gun in the other. Dr. Emma Rhodes froze. She could see the madness in the killer's eyes. She knew that he was going to kill her next. She had to think fast. She had to find a way to talk to him, to reach him. "It's okay," she said calmly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help you." The killer scraped the knife across the floor, making a shrill noise that sent chills down Dr. Emma Rhodes' spine. "You can't help me," he said, his voice full of rage. "Nobody can help me." "I can try," she said. "I want to help you. I promise." The killer stared at her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he dropped the knife and the gun. He fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Dr. Emma Rhodes rushed to him and held him as he cried. She knew that he was beyond help, but she also knew that she had to try. Emma is sitting in her office, going over some files, when she gets a call from one of her patients. Patient: "Hey, doc, I wanted to talk to you about something." "Emma, what is it?" Patient: "I think I might be hearing voices." Emma: "Okay, let's talk about that. When did you first start hearing voices?" Patient: "A few days ago. I was in my room and I heard someone calling my name. I thought it was my mom, but when I went to her room, she wasn't there." Emma: "Have you heard the voices since then?" Patient: "Yeah. They've been getting louder and more persistent." Emma: "Okay. I'm going to have to refer you to a colleague of mine. I think you might need a more specialized treatment than I can provide." The patient agrees and Emma makes the referral. After she hangs up, she starts to feel a bit uneasy. She's never had a patient with such severe symptoms before. She decides to do some research on voices and hallucinations. She starts to feel like she's being watched and her paranoia starts to get the better of her. She starts to believe that the patient's voices are actually trying to talk to her. She starts to hear the voices herself. Emma: "Hello?" Voice: "Hey, doc, we've been waiting for you." Emma: "Who are you?" Voice: "We're your patients. The ones you've been helping." Emma: "What do you want?" Voice: "We want you to help us." Emma: "Help you what?" Voice: "We're in danger. We need your help." Emma: "What kind of danger?" Voice. There's a monster. It's coming after us. Emma, what can I do? Voice. You have to find a way to stop it. Emma, how? Voice. We don't know. But you'll have to try. Emma, I'll do my best. Voice. That's all we can ask. CH.7 Is there anything you want to talk about, Emma? Dr. Rhodes stared at her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. She knew what was coming, and she was dreading it. I don't know what you mean, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You've been through a lot lately, the therapist continued. Losing your husband, and then your patient. Dr. Rhodes swallowed hard. She had been trying so hard to keep it together, but it was all starting to catch up with her. I can't talk about it, she said, her voice trembling. It's okay, Emma, the therapist said soothingly. We can talk about anything you want. Dr. Rhodes took a deep breath and nodded. I keep seeing his face, she said, her voice shaking. In my dreams, and when I close my eyes. Who? The therapist asked gently. My patient, Dr. Rhodes choked out. The one who killed himself. She could still see his face, contorted in pain and anger, as he put the gun to his head and pulled the trigger. She would never forget the sound of the shot, or the look on his face as he died. It's normal to feel like this, Emma, the therapist said. You're grieving. But I didn't even know him, she said, her voice rising. I only saw him for a few sessions, and then he was gone. How can I grieve for someone I barely knew? Because he was a human being, and his death has affected you, the therapist said. It's okay to be angry and scared and sad. You don't have to pretend to be strong. Dr. Rhodes nodded, her eyes filling with tears. She had been trying to be strong for so long, but it was all just too much. I'm sorry, she choked out. I just can't. And with that, she broke down into sobs, her body shaking with the force of her grief.